Hello and welcome to Missouri Legislative Update. This month we bring you our program from the floor of the Missouri Senate. In this month's show we bring you the sights and sounds of opening day and more. I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives.
And reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Jennifer Yapel. Lawmakers in the upper chamber ushered in the 2013 legislative session with the ceremony that resulted in the election of new leadership. Senate Communications correspondent Brad Bayshore shows us the pomp and circumstance of opening day in the Missouri Senate.
For the first time in 2013, the Missouri Senate was called to order as Lieutenant Governor Peter Kinder raised his gavel to begin the first regular session of the 97th General Assembly.
Oh, say, can you...
After the presentation of colors and a singing of the national anthem, the Senate officially welcomed 12 new members to the upper chamber, swearing in a total of 17 newly elected and re-elected senators.
And faithfully perform the duties of my office.
Shortly after the swearing-in ceremony, members of the Missouri Senate elected Senator Tom Dempsey of St. Charles to serve as Senate President Pro Tem, the highest-ranking member of the upper chamber. The new Senate leader outlined the chamber's top priorities this legislative session during his opening day address: building infrastructure, investing in education, and growing the state's economy.
We must focus on solutions that will promote greater economic vitality, spur employment, and grow personal incomes. Our job, our vision, our challenge is to create big solutions. The acronym BIG, B-I-G, to build our infrastructure, to invest in education, and to grow our economy.
Minority Floor Leader Senator Jolie Justus of Kansas City says there might be some disagreements this year, but overall, she looks forward to working for more jobs and economic development in the state of Missouri.
We obviously want to push Missouri forward. There are going to be times when we disagree. There's no question about that. We obviously will have differences of agreement in tax policy and on whether or not to expand the Medicaid system here in the state of Missouri. And so those things we will have to work on. And I'm excited that I have a fantastic working relationship, as does the rest of my caucus, with the majority leadership and the majority caucus. And so we are ready to sit down, to talk, to negotiate, to compromise. Those are all words we understand, and we're looking forward to doing that.
The majority-minority split in the Senate is 24-10. The 2013 legislative session runs until May 17th. Reporting for the Missouri Senate, I'm Brad Bayshore.
Newly elected and returning lawmakers traveled to Jefferson City for the start of the 2013 legislative session. In this next story, we bring you the sights and sounds of opening day in the Missouri House. With the bang of the gavel, the 2013 legislative session had begun. The first act of business, the oath of office. At the start of the 97th General Assembly, Republicans hold a 109-52 majority over the Democrats. After taking the oath of office, lawmakers unanimously elected Tim Jones to serve as Speaker of the Missouri House. The Speaker plans to focus his energy on three main topics during the 2013 legislative session.
This is going to be a bipartisan agenda that I believe Missourians will embrace, of economic development for job creation, of looking for a strong energy policy for a more energy-independent Missouri, and education, protecting the funding as the House has definitely done, K through 12 and higher ed.
The Republicans hold a veto-proof majority in both the House and Senate. Despite an historic majority, House Democrats claim they still have an important role to play in the legislative process.
We will have to be the vocal opposition, but we don't want to just be the blanket thorn in the side. We want to be able to work towards a better Missouri. We want to put people back to work, but we want to do it responsibly.
The topic of Medicaid expansion has been a hot-button issue since the governor announced his support behind expanding the state's Medicaid rolls. House Democrats support the call and believe it will save the state in the long run.
I think putting 220,000 more Missourians, giving them access to health care is the right thing to do. And we're talking about the federal government covering 100% of these costs. We're going to save the state $250 million over 3 years, and that's a conservative estimate.
No, we are likely not very interested in expanding eligibility. We would be interested in seeing if we can obtain additional funding for those who truly need it, the ones who Republicans have always supported, the elderly, children, and the disabled.
Lawmakers now turn their attention to the governor's annual State of the State address. where he will deliver his proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year and lay out his 2013 legislative agenda.
Much of the work on a bill is performed in committee before the legislation even reaches the Senate floor for debate. Senators spent most of their time in the first few weeks of session in their respective committees, considering measures filed so far this session. In January, the Senate Education Committee considered testimony on Senate Bill 7, legislation filed to address school accreditation for failing school districts in the Show Me State. Senator David Pierce of Warrensburg, who also chairs the panel, sponsors the bill and says more needs to be done to help these schools that have lost their accreditation.
I also feel that it means that the status quo is not working and that the district needs some help and support in a case like that.
In the Senate Ways and Means Committee, members considered Senate Bill 11, sponsored by Senator Eric Schmidt of Glendale. His legislation would phase in an individual income tax deduction for business income and reduce the corporate income tax rate over a 5-year period. And in the Senate Financial and Governmental Organizations and Elections Committee, senators heard testimony on Senate Bill 82, sponsored by Senator Kurt Schaefer of Columbia. The legislation would require the governor to call a special election if the office of lieutenant governor is vacated.
Our concern in the Senate is a bit different than it is in the House because pursuant to the Missouri Constitution, the lieutenant governor is the president of the Senate, and pursuant to Supreme Court decisions, the lieutenant governor can take the dais and hold the dais as long as he or she wants. And that obviously creates a different dynamic for us and how this body operates as opposed to the House.
His legislation garners the support of Senator Scott Sifton of St. Louis.
I certainly understand your intent, and I think any clarification would be helpful.
A measure that would require schools to provide firearms safety education and address dangerous or armed intruders was considered in the Senate General Laws Committee. Senate Bill 75 is sponsored by Senator Dan Brown of Rolla.
This act actually establishes an active shooter and intruder response training for school programs by January 1, 2014.
Senator Jamila Nasheed of St. Louis tells the bill's sponsor schools in her district have different needs and priorities regarding teacher and student training.
And this is not a top priority. If we're going, like I said, if we're going to spend monies on professional development, let's teach those teachers how to deal with kids that are below proficiency, that are impoverished, those kids that's coming into the school system on free and reduced lunch, which is 80% of them. How do we get their brains to moving?
And in the Senate Judiciary and Civil and Criminal Jurisprudence Committee, panel members heard testimony on Senate Bill 113, sponsored by Senator Schmidt. The bill would require anyone 18 or older who witnesses a child being sexually abused to report the incident to any law enforcement agency or the Department of Social Services.
Currently, certain professional workers, such as physicians, nurses, principals, or school officials, or other persons with the responsibility of caring for children have this obligation. This would extend that responsibility to everybody.
As of this taping, many measures have already moved from their respective committees, passed by the full Senate, and delivered to the House for similar consideration, including Senate Bill 20, sponsored by Senator Bob Dixon of Springfield, which would make changes to certain benevolent tax credits benefiting nonprofit organizations, and Senate Bill 10, sponsored by Senator Schmidt, which would create a tax credit to attract amateur sporting events to the Show Me State.
The Missouri House used its stamp of approval for the first time in 2013 as it sent a high-profile piece of legislation to the other side of the building. In this next story, we take a look at the House bill and how it aims to change the way the state's top official deals with a vacancy at the statewide level. The Missouri House approved a proposal changing the way the governor deals with a vacancy in a statewide office. House Bill 110 requires any vacancy in the office of U.S. Senator, Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, State Auditor, or State Treasurer to be filled by an acting officer appointed by the governor until a successor is elected during the next scheduled general election. The bill's sponsor claims his proposal makes sure the voters have the power, not one specific person.
If there's a vacancy in the office of any statewide office, I think the people should have the first and last opportunity to choose who governs them.
2013 marks the 5th year Smith has worked on the proposal. The proposal also restricts the governor's appointed officer from running for the office when it comes available. One vocal opponent claims the stipulations the legislation places on the governor's acting officer are unfair.
If you really think about it, women who are appointed to a statewide office, minorities appointed to a statewide office would be prevented from running in the following election. And as you know, our numbers in the legislature in the state are poor.
Absolutely not. I think that's a ridiculous accusation. This only helps all Missourians to have equal playing opportunity in filling the offices.
Lawmakers approved the bill by a 115 to 45 vote. The proposal now heads to the Senate for consideration. A Missouri House committee takes a look at a proposal restoring several benevolent tax credits in the state. In this next story, we take a look at how the legislation aims to help charitable groups like food pantries, pregnancy resource centers, and more. The Missouri House Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities discussed legislation providing several family-friendly tax credits. House Bill 87 restores tax credits benefiting local food pantries and pregnancy resource centers. It also extends a tax credit program intended to help single-parent families. The sponsor of the proposal claims this is the right way to help those who are suffering in our society.
This is a really great role for us as elected officials to engage the public in the charitable aspects of our society, particularly when we have communities and not-for-profits that are doing a tremendous job, and I think that they do a much better job than we could do it ourselves.
According to Burleson, the proposal only carries an $8 million fiscal note. During the hearing, several committee members raised concerns, however, regarding the makeup of one of the groups benefiting from the tax credits.
My concern is just about one provision of the bill, and that's the pregnancy resource centers. I think we heard testimony here today that we're not sure that all of those centers are providing accurate medical information, and that certainly there aren't necessarily medical people on staff.
Following the hearing, no further action was taken on the proposal. The committee plans to vote on the legislation next week during its next scheduled hearing. After the break, the MissouriNet's Bob Priddy sits down with two members from the Missouri Senate's leadership team to discuss the 2013 legislative session.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Welcome back. In this next segment, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle sit down with the MissouriNet's Bob Priddy to discuss the challenges facing the General Assembly in 2013. Up first, Senate President Pro Tem Tom Dempsey.
Welcome to this edition of Capitol Dialogue. I'm Bob Priddy from the Missourinet and Missourinet.com. We're talking to the Senate President Pro Tem Tom Dempsey, who's from St. Charles County, moving up from Majority Floor Leader last year to Senate President Pro Tem. How big a difference is that in the work you have to do?
Very different. And my staff and I were just talking about it, how, we thought I was busy last year with the number of meeting requests, but the day goes by very quickly. And certainly the duties have changed. I no longer handle floor activity, and so just really kind of setting things up and so that we have an environment where members are working together to the best that they can.
Tell me what it is you do specifically, other than make people get along with each other.
Well, early in the year, we've got that first 30 days that we have to act on all the interim gubernatorial appointments. So we wait for the governor's investigation reports to get sent to us, and then we have our own Senate investigator and staff, and we work through the process with sponsoring senators and try to orderly work through all those interim appointments. And we have, I think, 75 that we need to deal with in 30 days. And several of them are, they're directors, they're appointments to important boards, the Board of Curators, PSC Commission, so big responsibility. So, and we take our advice and consent role very seriously. So that's one thing we're doing. As the, Republican leader for the Senate, Republicans, we've had, through the summer and fall issue development, and then, we've also been communicating to everyone, yourself included, how there's a real desire to hit the ground running. So very on, was working on committee assignments, chairmanships, and we were able to move on the second day of session with those. I thought that was a very good step and helped send that message. And next week we're going to hear legislation, and I accepted reports from 2 committees today so that we'll have floor activity next week.
You and the floor leader, Ron Richards from Joplin, both have used a phrase early on about having a more functional Senate this year. Talk to me about what you mean by that and why you're emphasizing that compared to what we've had, I guess, in the past couple of years.
Well, I think everyone that I work with in the Senate, Republican and Democrat, recognizes that we're continue to be in the most challenging economic climate and family environment that people are facing and have faced in generations. And that as they look to the federal level, they don't see good working relationships. They don't see the ability of members to work through problems and do the people's business. And the message that we want to send from Jefferson City is we're unlike the federal government. We understand these are tough times and challenging times, and that we need to work together to act on the people's behalf. And we need to do that in a way that is where we're respectful of each other, and respect is something that I heard from members as we approached this year, and that didn't always happen on the floor last year. And so we may have our differences, but we all make the same sacrifices to be here, and we should respect one another. And how can anyone have respect for us if we can't respect one another and how we work together?
You're one of 24 members of the Senate who's a Republican. There are only 10 Democrats. What's the role of the Democrats in a chamber where that balance is very much unbalanced?
Well, it's very different than the House. Much more collaboration because of the rules that we have over here, and Senate Democrats still have a lot to say about public policy and where they make good points. I think because of the respect that we do have, when issues are raised, we try to work through them and incorporate their thoughts. There are going to still be those few kind of heated partisan issues that divide us, but there are a lot of other things that we do where it's important that we're able to work together, and we do.
Early in the session, I think maybe on the first day, you had a joint news conference with Jolie Justus, the minority floor leader, and I remember her saying that the majority of the minority platform is about the same as the majority of the majority platform. Does that make you feel good to hear somebody like that say that very early on in a session?
Well, I think when you look at our agenda, I think bottom line, she's saying there's some things they like about it.
Yeah.
And that's because it's getting to those issues that are important. It's making sure that for everybody who is working to get a job, that there's a job out there for them. And it's not an $8 an hour job, but there's an opportunity to really work and support your family and make a wage that where you can do that.
Where do you think are going to be the sharpest differences between Republicans and Democrats?
I would say, as has been in the past, on some of the legal climate issues and labor reform issues.
Legal climate meaning?
As we try to work through medical malpractice and the court decision in August striking the cap on non-economic damages. Historically, they've been opposed, and while we've tried to address that issue, and on labor reforms, changes to prevailing wage have been a rub for them in the past, and our effort is not to make sure that people are making $8 an hour where they should be making a market rate. It's that when that market rate is $30 an hour, they shouldn't be making $60 an hour. So, but I think reforms like prevailing wage, they'll continue to disagree with us on the problem and therefore the solution.
We'll probably take your temperature a time or two during the session, and certainly afterwards. We'll come back and see how things have gone as we progress. Thanks for being with us on this edition of Capitol Dialogue.
Thank you.
When we return, we get a different perspective from the ranking minority member of the Missouri Senate. That and more after the break on Missouri Legislative Update.
$7,000 high school students drop out every school day. Let's catch them before it's too late. To start helping students in your community, visit boostup.org.
Welcome back to Missouri Legislative Update. In the second part of our Capitol Dialogue with Senate leaders, Bob Priddy continues his discussion with Senate Minority Floor Leader Jolie Justus regarding legislative priorities for the 2013 legislative session.
We're talking to the new Senate Minority Leader Jolie Justus of Kansas City today on this section of Capitol Dialogue. She is the new Minority Leader. That means that she is in charge of all of the Democrats in the state Senate. How big a job is that? There's only 10 of you.
I was going to say, it's not a big job in size, but I think it's a big job in task. We have 10 folks, which is an increase from last year when we had 8. And part of what I've been finding in the beginning is that we have the new 5 people that came over from the House. And so there's been a lot of time talking about the difference between the House and the Senate.
What is the big difference?
I hate to say it this way, but in the House, they came over feeling a little abused by the majority. And of course, that's part of the role of the House. It's a lot different than the Senate. And so a lot of what we've been talking to them about is this is a completely different situation that you're in now. And while you were charged with being flamethrowers in the House, everybody is equal here in the Senate. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about that.
Well, you Democrats are outnumbered 24-10.
Yes.
How do you stay relevant when you're that much in the minority in the Senate?
I think one of the ways that we stay relevant is helping the folks in the middle, the pragmatic middle, actually pass the legislation that the majority of Missourians want. An example is a few years back during the special session when we passed the Missouri Manufacturing Jobs Act, or the Ford bill. We wouldn't have gotten that bill through if it weren't for all of our Democratic votes. And I think we're going to see some things like that again this year, where there are going to be some issues that moderate Republicans need the Democrats in order to move their agenda forward.
Does that open you up to some possibilities of horse trading to get some things you want?
My hope is that it would. In the past, we've always been able to negotiate those things. The good news is that we've got a great working relationship with the majority party, and none of us are afraid of words like compromise or negotiation, and so I think there's always an option of discussing things, and everything's on the table right now.
At the opening of the session, you and the majority folks had a joint news conference, and you said the majority of the minority agenda equals the majority of the majority agenda. Where are the differences?
I think you're going to find differences in a lot of traditional areas that we see from year to year. I think some of the majority's decisions and legislative agenda relating to organized labor is obviously going to cause some problems with us, and so I think we need to be negotiating on those. And specifically, I'm talking about prevailing wage, talking about paycheck protection, those sorts of things. I think there will be some discussions relating to reform in the legal system that I think will be some problematic. Obviously, the medical malpractice caps, and if we're going to go back to the discussion of the employment discrimination bill that's been vetoed twice by the governor, that'll also be somewhat problematic. But the good news is that we're already in negotiations on places where we can agree on those specific bills.
The two folks who are in charge of the majority party have both been saying they want a Senate that is a more functional Senate this year. How bad was it last year?
Well, I think it depends on who you are and what you're trying to get done. The reality is I understand the frustration of the majority. It is very difficult to go back to your constituencies and say, yes, we have a majority, but we haven't been able to advance our agenda. And I think part of that has been because of just honest ideological differences within the Republican Party. And I think that some of the changes that have been made over the last year electorally are going to lead to a little more, I think, moving things forward. But I think we also have new folks, and it's too early to tell whether or not all of those problems are going to go away for the majority.
I have to ask you about a big adjustment that you're making. You are from Kansas City, but your new district, because of redistricting, is central and spreading into eastern Missouri. How are you adapting to that? How are you handling that?
You know, the good news is that I was raised in Branson, Missouri. I'm the only Democrat in a Republican family, and so I'm used to being in the minority, and I'm used to, frankly, a diverse, living arrangement. I can go easily between Kansas City and Branson, and I feel like I can go easily between Kansas City and Callaway County. But specifically, what am I doing? I am reaching out to folks in my new district, and we are getting to know each other. I, for instance, in February, will be spending 2 days touring around Callaway County, getting to know the folks of Callaway County, meeting with business leaders, meeting with all the different organizations. The requests that I've had for those legislative tours, I've been doing those across the state, and I plan to do more of that too.
Now, the fact is, although you're from Kansas City, you actually do have property in Callaway County, so you're kind of in your district, aren't you?
Yeah, strangely enough, and it had absolutely nothing to do with what led me to actually be the senator from Callaway County, but I have owned property and lived in Callaway County during the legislative session for the past 7 years, so it's a good fit.
Do you and Tom Dempsey get along pretty well?
We get along very well. We have had a strong working relationship over the last few years, and I just have really enjoyed working with him, respect him. We disagree from time to time, and that'll happen, but I think our friendship and our respect for each other will shine through this session.
Last question for you. This is the last 2 years of your time in the state Senate. Do you like term limits?
I don't like term limits. I tell anyone who will listen that if I could do this for the rest of my life, I would. I truly think that being in the Missouri State Senate is the greatest job I've ever had, and I am thrilled at the opportunity that I've had to move things forward as it relates to things that I'm passionate about, foster care for kids and child care assistance and that sort of thing. I feel like I'm finally hitting my stride, and I've only got 2 years left. I wish we could rethink those, and I hope that we do.
We've been talking to Jolie Justus, the Senate Minority Leader for this year. We thank her for being with us on this edition.
That concludes this episode of Missouri Legislative Update. If you have any questions about the legislation or committees that appeared in this program, please visit the Missouri Senate website at www.senate.mo.gov. There you'll find the contact information for the 34 members of the Missouri Senate, as well as a link to the Senate's newsroom website. I'm Jennifer Yapel reporting for the Missouri Senate.
And I'm Jonathan Lorenz reporting for the Missouri House of Representatives. If you have any questions regarding anything going on in the Missouri House, you can visit our website at www.house.mo.gov. For all of us with Missouri Legislative Update, thanks for watching. And we leave you this month with the sights and sounds of Inauguration Day 2013. See you next time.